So let's start today. Now today what we're going to do is lease accounting. But again, keep remember yourself, while this is meant to be long-term liabilities topic, what we'll teach you in lease accounting is all about asset as well as liability. Okay, because under this standard, they'll teach you how to record a lease from a lessor point of view and a lessee point of view. Clear? Now you obviously know by now that a lessor is the owner. Therefore, for him, it will be an asset. Correct? A lessee is a user. So for him, it will be a liability. Here. So you need to, and obviously there are some differences. There is one difference, US gap is a little bit off on that record. They have a difference, we'll come to that. But every time you lease accounting, please understand lessor, lessee, because it is not exactly identical in many cases. Okay, so let's start. Lessor is the person who owns an asset, gives on lease and receives payment. Lessee is the person who takes the asset and makes a payment. Obviously, for a lessor, it's an asset, so the money will be cash inflow. For lessee, it will be a cash outflow. Installments are paid by the lessee to the lessor. Now, there are two types of lease. Okay, two types. What are two types of lease? Operating and finance lease. Now, you guys tell me, what is the operating lease? Operating lease. Answer. Think of an operating lease. Give me an example. Operating lease.
Using the basic word, it is like a lease paid for using the asset for operational purpose.
Okay. No, so I'll defer there. That's a good attempt. But remember a lease, okay, a lease is taken for operational purposes only. If it's a personal purpose, then obviously it won't be a part of your business. But yes, it's a lease taken for operational purposes, but on a short-term basis. Operating word means short-term, right? CapEx is more of a long-term word, right? So when I say an operating lease, it means a lease for short-term operations for a short-term duration, right? A lease that is taken for a long-term means 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. It's called a finance lease. Are we clear? So first difference, an operating lease, and remember both are for operations. An operating lease is a lease which is more for a short term, and this is more for a long term. Okay, example, you took a house on rent. You took for 1 year, 2 years, maybe 2 or 3 years. That is the short term because it is a house I took for the less than the life. But let's say I took a car. I took a car on rent for 5 years. Example. Now you tell me after 5 years, is there any life left in the car? You have used almost full life. So effectively you have bought the car now. Because when you use a car 5 years, you will not sell to someone else to use. You will dispose it or scrap it. So effectively, you have taken the car as a purchase only, not as a lease. Got it? So therefore, finance lease is more like a purchase. But you're calling it a lease. You're fooling them as a lease, but actually it's a purchase. Because after you use it, no one can use it. So you only have bought it, but you have only called it a lease by taking a loan and paying installment. It is okay to pay installment, no? That does not say it's a lease, right? So what the accounting standards have done, a very interesting thing. They said, let us think of substance over form. This is a very important principle, substance over form. What does it mean? Before I go to this, does anyone know what's the meaning of the word substance over form? Please enlighten me. So substance over form is firstly understand it's an accounting principle like materiality, going concern, accrual. That way, there's one more very important principle which dictates your accounting, and that is substance over form, which means that in form, that means on a piece of paper, legally or on a piece of paper, right? You must have signed something. You listen, I will take it on rent. I'll take the car on rent. But in substance, are you really renting it or are you actually buying it? In substance, the transaction was never to lease or rent. You only made a fool of people by saying, okay, I'm buying a rent agreement. But everyone knows that you only are the owners. Like example, if you see any company, they'll like Tata Motors, they'll give you a car on hire purchase. After 5, they'll say you can keep the car. So where are you renting it? You have bought it only, but they give you a name of a lease. Got it? So lease accounting is driven by the principle. If they ask you what is the accounting principle that drives lease accounting, the answer is substance over form. Because lease accounting says, I want to look at the substance of the transaction, not the form. What you write on paper, I don't care. What you intend to do is what I care. Understood? Okay. So what
Can
is
you,
substance over
can you
form?
come back on that? I couldn't understand that. Sorry.
Sorry?
Please, can you reiterate the same
So-
because it was not.
So the word substance means what is the actual reality of the transaction? What is the real reason you have done it? That is substance. And form means what is the legal paper that you've done the transfer. So I must have said that I will do a lease on a legal paper. That is a form of the transaction. That is on paper. But the real substance, the substance or the reality is I have purchased the asset. So in form, it is a lease, but in substance, it's a purchase. So should I record it as a rent or should I record it as a purchase? The answer is purchase because in reality, you have not taken rent, you have purchased it, but you're giving it the name of a lease. So accounting principle, substance over form means you should record it as a purchase, not as a lease. Got the logic?
Thank you, sir.
Substance
Thank you.
over
Got
form.
it. Yeah.
Clear? Very important.
So one example you gave is this car. What is another like a property? Property to whatever you take it will always appreciate only.
Agree. No, so let's come to house. In a house property, if you take a rent for 5 years, obviously your life is 90 and 100 years. So you can never call it a finance lease in a house property. House property, if I take a 5-year lease, let's say you have 10-year rent, 10-year lease rental for a house property. Even that is an operating lease. Because my question is, it is not about long term or short term. It's about have you taken it for most of the useful life? If a house property has a useful life of 100 years, you can't say I took a 10-year lease so it becomes mine. Understood? So again, I'm telling you, it is not about the period, it's about the substance. Useful life. If I buy a car for 5 years rent, obviously 5 years is the useful life. Usually around 6 to 7 years, but you have used most of the useful life. So there's no point calling it a lease.
So,
Yeah.
those leases of this property or land, which is for
Yeah.
99 years or so,
Correct.
can be called under substance form.
You can, but let me ask you one thing. Very good point. If you take a lease of 99 years on land, okay? Now you tell me, what is the useful life of land?
It is lifetime because land is.
Very good, very good. So if land is indefinite useful life, you cannot call a 99-year lease also as a purchase. It is still a lease. It is still a lease because you rightly said land has indefinite useful life. But yes, if I took, let's say, a building on a 99-year lease, I will call it a purchase because a building useful life cannot be potentially more than even 50 years, right? You have to eventually demolish it one day. The land is indefinite, not the building.
Okay.
Got it?
Got the logic.
Super. Yeah, if you learn the logic, guys, you don't have to learn accounting. You have to just learn the logic. The logic is repeated in the accounts. Okay. So going back to this, you got the reality. So now I'll come back to what exactly happens. Last example, let's say you took a home loan. Now you know the home loan you took from a bank. Tell me, in whose name is the house?
The banks.
Very good. Is a bank's name. But is the house belong to a bank or to you? It belongs to you. Best example. So the home loan is a bank's name for only 25 years. But the home has a useful life of 100 years and you will take it back. You are living in it and you also will dispose of it. So in substance, it belongs to you, even though the name is of the bank. But it's substance over form. You should as your asset, not the bank's asset. And the bank will show as a liability, not as an asset. Got the logic? So every accounting rule, if you forget what to do, think of logic, think of substance. The substance is given the treatment, not the form. Okay, very good. So let's go back to this. So what is an operating lease? An operating lease is a lease like a rent agreement where you are only using the asset, but there is no ownership. There is no ownership. Are we clear? But in a finance lease, there is ownership. There is ownership along with usage. Okay. In a finance lease, you effectively, remember, ownership is effective in substance. On paper, you may not be the owner. On paper, like your own house, on lease, EMI, you're not the owner. It's the bank who's the owner. But effectively, you're the owner. Why? Because you are enjoying the benefits of ownership from the purchase till the sale. So that is why operating lease is usage, no ownership. Finance lease is ownership along with usage. So now you tell me, on operating lease, if you have no ownership, can you show it as an asset? No, it is a expense. But finance lease, you deserve to show it as an asset in your books, even though you're not the owner. So this is the first case where title is not important. The purpose is important. Are we clear? That's why if you notice, I never tell you, and he lastly taught you, it is not important to have the title. I never said that first see the title and then you can recognize the asset. I never said that last week. Recognition is not dependent on title, because sometimes without title you have the asset. Clear? Okay. So let's continue the logic, okay, of how lease are classified. Now this slide is going to show you classification from a lessee point of view.